Welcome to Season 3.
I think we're good.
She made it.
I did. Yes. Oh my gosh.
I know all the technical issues associated.
Seriously. Oh my gosh. Yes.
So, hello to everybody out there in internet land. Welcome to Change for the Better, episode 36.
I'm Stacy Tiro, a high school performing arts teacher for over 25 years. I've taught a lot of amazing people. Now that so many of my students are adults, they'll teach me how, through the lessons in my classroom, they have been changed for the better.
This is just moving right along. So, first, I will say that life does not always provide a clear and direct pathway for us to follow. Instead, most people have to do some significant exploration in order to figure out what direction they're going to go next. And what is most important in those cases is to be really in touch with the things that we love and to stay focused on them as we navigate those twists and turns that happen really naturally in our lives. My guest today knew from really early on that performing arts in some way would be a really important part of her life. In high school, she immersed herself in my dance classes and the activities like marching band, color guard, concert and jazz bands. She was a little trumpet player, the Spirit Week step team, that we had every fall, and the Rapping Poetic Club, like anything that got her moving and music she was just really drawn to it. And she knew that those were powerful, motivating forces, and that somehow she would need to stay tied to them as she grew into her adulthood. After high school, she went into the RCC Honors Program, where she was a founding member of their dance company. And then she moved on to earn a BA in music for vocal performance from Nyack College. And while Spring Valley may have been where she grew up, she felt compelled to explore her passions for education, singing classical music, and her faith elsewhere. Fast forward a couple years, she completed her master's degree in vocal performance at Lee University down in Tennessee, of all places. But then she ran into some snafus, and sometimes that happens towards the end. And she wound up redirecting her attention to an internship at Grace Church in Ohio. There, she learned how to be a worship leader, which was really strongly tied into her faith. And that went a long way in boosting her confidence. Then she took an elementary position as a reading and math specialist for struggling learners. She became a music director for a church in Michigan. And most recently, she is substitute teaching in a Christian school where she's working while she's completing her Master of Arts in Teaching degree this coming spring. While your adult path is not always super clear when you graduate high school or even college, your best guide is to follow your heart, your gut, and sometimes your faith, and trust that you will be able to make the wisest decisions that will take you where you need to go. I am really excited to get into this conversation. We have a lot to talk about. So, first, let's just introduce our guest. So, what is your name, the year that you graduated, and just tell me a little more about what you do and where you are now.
So my name is Nathalie Alcime, and I am currently, and you just said that so well, I'm currently a sub at a Christian school and completing my master's in elementary education. And I love that you kind of introed that really well, because I think a lot of times we think that we have to have all the answers immediately after we're done with high school, or even immediately after college. And even for some who might have been really blessed to have that idea of what they wanted to be since they were little, and are in it now and are faithfully doing it, like kudos to them. Everybody's journey is different, it looks different. I definitely think that as time changes, technology advances, and we're given a lot more options. And that has expanded our perspective on what career should look like, for us, or even, for the world. So it's no longer that traditional sense of like, this is what my parents want me to be, or this is what I want to be since I was two. Like, there's just so much options out there, and it gives us the freedom to explore and to figure out what that looks like for us.
Indeed. It's so true. And I think the pandemic was certainly indicative of what you're saying, especially in the education realm. We were literally forced to redefine what education was going to look like, albeit temporarily. But so many of those strategies and methods that we employ to try and teach our kids, in the virtual and the technological realm, we're still using a lot of them now, like this Zoom conversation. I didn't know what Zoom was prior to the pandemic. I think being open to those changes and not getting so dug into any one thing that we're doing right now really helps us to figure out, oh, there's other possibilities here that we can roll into if we just allow ourselves to do that.
Right. And it's almost like the pandemic was a very difficult time. And I get that, a lot of losses and all that stuff. But I also feel that in some ways, even to add on what you're saying, is that it also gave us permission to think outside the box. It provided us the time and space to actually do that. Because when you're just so caught up in your everyday routines, you have bills to pay, you have so many jobs that you're doing, that you have no time to even figure out who you are. And I think a lot of times we just get so caught up with the busyness that we haven't really realized how it hasn't given us time to really think about, what do I actually really want? What do I actually really want to do? Am I really happy working here? Or am I just trying to push through because I have bills to pay?
Absolutely. It almost took us being shoved out of the box to give ourselves the permission to do that. Because we're creatures of habit, we're creatures of comfort. We don't like challenging ourselves in that way. If it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Right.
right. And so to your point, we really needed to be shoved. A lot of us. I know I did. And
Yep.
I would never want to say that the pandemic was a good thing, but I think even out of terrible bad things, you can find good things out of that. So for my family, for my career, for my like next steps, like this thing, wouldn't have evolved out of my brain if I weren't already doing the 25 things that led up to it to let me think of, oh, this is a viable thing I could do.
Right.
So our lives just kind of build on our experiences and the changes that we're forced to absorb. So before I ask you another question, I really wanted to share a little bit with the audience about how our paths sort of continued to, weave in and out over the years. So you graduated in 2007, right?
Correct.
She graduated, but then as it happens, we would like sort of message each other once in a while, just kind of like checking in. It was like, it'd be years, and then like a little text would happen. It was like really lovely. And at one point, and I think it was in 2014, we had this really great lunch date where we were talking about your thoughts about pursuing a music major.
Yes.
Remember that? It was Panera. I think we went to Panera.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I had to kind of go back in our text chain to like, but I was
That's
like,
great.
we sat there for like hours and we were talking.
Yeah.
And then later on, she shared a whole bunch of recipes with me for soup jumu, which is that Haitian New Year, on New Year's Day, that my students' families would make. And sometimes they would bring to me. I was like, oh, I have to have this. And of course, I really wanted the recipe. So now there's like, oh, here's recipes. And of course, I never had the courage to actually make it. It's really complicated.
I know it is.
But the deeper connection or reconnection came out of the pandemic in the spring of 2020. So the backstory is, so George Floyd was murdered on May 25th, and the insanity that was happening surrounding it, this I don't even call it backlash, but it was just like this emotional sort of upheaval, cultural emotional upheaval. And so I took to Facebook, because that's what we do, to see how people were responding to the insanity of it. And I had come across all sorts of emotional responses, and in wanting to like do something while I was stuck at home in the pandemic, going, well, do I go to a rally? Do I go to a protest? What do I do? I saw all of these social media posts, and then I was really inspired to collect them with permission. And I wrote a play called How Do We Feel Right Now? Because I wanted to create a piece of art, because art reflects life, that would help to reflect the sorrow, the frustration, and the hope that people had regarding that hot topic of racial inequity and culture in our society. So for all of the raw, angry responses that crossed my eyes, Natalie's had a more hopeful tone. And it was filled with gratitude for the allies in her life and in the world. And so I reached out to her to see if she would let me include that little bit in the piece, and she graciously did. And then our sort of paths kind of really crossed again in that meaningful way. Long story, sorry, I'm trying to keep it short. But the show included a song called Now that I wrote in collaboration with episode 6's Hernz Laguerre Jr. And that song really resonated deeply with Natalie, which I was so thrilled. And so months after the show's thespian virtual debut on YouTube, she asked if she could perform the song in her September, what turned out to be her last September's musical recital, which was part of an effort to raise money for her mission trip to Ecuador, which she was doing every year prior to the pandemic. And now she was trying to like get back into the swing of things. So it was this gorgeous, beautiful, full circle experience to see her perform my song. And of course, I'll be linking that in the blog for the episode. And I think I might also just play your performance at the end of this. So yeah. So if you wanted to talk a little bit just about that experience, I would love to hear it.
Yeah, for sure. And I'll even give you even an extra background info too about just the recital in itself. I had felt like I was in a very dry season in some ways of like not performing as I would like to perform. And even prior to the pandemic, I just always just had like little ideas. I mean, I didn't finish grad school, but I was like, just because I don't have that master's degree doesn't mean that I'm a musician. Sometimes we think and believe that a degree can solidify who we are as a person and so on and so forth. And don't get me wrong, like education is really important, but education can come in different ways, and it's just a matter of people putting work and effort to become a better version of themselves. And so for quite some time that had been floating in my mind, and it was just that I just never put actions to my thoughts and to my ideas. And then when the pandemic happened, it just came back again, and I was like, okay, well, I have some songs already. Let me just work on those songs and then make them better and work on some of the techniques. And it was just on and off, on and off, on and off. And then finally I was like, I really need to do something about this. And I was just so thankful for some friend musicians and friend non-musicians to encourage me and to say like, hey, if this is what you want to do, you got to let your passion drive you. Don't let fear drive you. And that was my motivation in some ways. And yes, imperfect, but that's okay, because I think if it brings you one step closer, then that's more than enough. I think sometimes we look for fast results and all that stuff. But even just one step ahead, taking it little by little, that brings you closer to that. From there, I think, when the situation happened in, was it Minnesota or Missouri? I forget where, but
Yeah,
it
Minnesota,
was Minnesota. Yeah.
St. Paul, like
Um,
Twin Cities area.
that's right, yes. And so when that happened, that deeply moved me. And I was already in conversation with like other classical musicians or musicians in general and people of color, and how it affected us so much. And it's like, oh, here's another story. Oh, here's another shooting. And then that brings up all the tension and the frustration in our institutions, and just so many frustration and pain. And it's like, well, what do you do with that? Do you stay frustrated and you talk about all the things that aren't happening and all the things that are happening that are devastating? Or to take that pain and to take those emotions and to make art out of it, you know what I mean? And art can look in different ways, whether it's music or painting or drama, whatever it is. Like, we can make use to it, because when we look at history, a lot of the way that music was birthed was through social issues and devastation and hardships. I just didn't know what to do. And so when I heard that you were putting out a short play, that was like very moving for me. And uh, it ignited something in me that was very different, but different in a good way. I feel like I'm about to cry. But I needed that to be able to push me to say, okay, you have all of these emotions inside. Like, you can't keep it bottled up. What can you do so that it can not only be a healing process for me, but that it can also be that for other people, and that it can also be an encouragement. And I'm all about talking about real issues. I don't like to like fake the funk or talk about surface level issues. And sometimes that is a common thing in our culture at times, to just talk about the surfacey stuff. And I'm like, surfacey stuff doesn't bring about change. All it does is just make you feel comfortable, and that's it. It doesn't bring growth. It doesn't bring anything fruitful. And so I just loved, with the mixture of my conversation with people, and then just some thoughts that I was processing, and then just your play, and then hearing the song, I was like, oh, like, this is it. Like, I feel like society in so many ways has disappointed me as a person of color, or as a Haitian person. I'm Haitian American. At just that in it of itself, just feeling silenced and feeling like nobody's hearing me, nobody's listening. And then taking that kind of frustration and just saying, you know what, let me sing this. And I felt like everything that was written just expressed how I felt. And I was able to sing it in a way that was true to my soul, and in a way that was able to bring light to the situation, to bring awareness of it, but then also to bring a call of change. And that's exactly what we need. We need a call for change, and then we need to be able to allow our feet to follow through with the things that we say that affect us. I think so many times it's so easy to talk about issues, like, you sit around a table, you talk about it, you hear about it on TV, all that stuff, but what does that do? What are you going to do about it after? Are you just going to sit there and keep listening, or are you going to make a difference? You're going to plug into whatever that change is for you in that time. And that's how I felt, listening to that song. And there were some other songs that, I've had some other musicians, friends that were just listening and singing, and just trying to gain more awareness of social justice through music. And so then I felt like, okay, how can I be a part of that? And that's how I was like, you know what? I want to reach out, ask if I can do this song, and then let that be a part of the song set that I was looking to do, and then just go for it. And I wanted to do something that was meaningful. And I can go on and on about the whole like classical and traditional recitals and how it should look like and all that stuff. But I've always known about myself that I just never fit in into one box. So whether it was school, whether it was church, I just always had this personality, this mind of like, wow, we can just make nothing into something. And how can we do that? Let's problem solve this and figure it out and make it happen.
In writing that song, the background of that is Hernz. We were collaborating on that whole piece, and he actually wrote a poem which was called Now, which is where the lyrics of the song came from. And he submitted it. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, there's a song here. There's a song here. I know there is. I have to sit at the piano and I got to bang out some chords and figure it out. And so once I started it, like it happened so fast. And the arrangement happened really fast. And I've always wanted to like rearrange it and like draw it out, but that's for like another day. I put it together and I sang it through and I played it for Hearns. And he was like, oh my God, yeah. I'm like, good, we just co-wrote a song. Woohoo. And so my vision for it is I want that song to get out. I want it to be, I don't know, a rallying cry or a grounding force for people who are feeling that way, to ask the question, why is it now? Why is it only now? Why didn't we wake up a long time ago and start looking at each other in better light? And I've always felt a little, I guess, weird because I am not clearly a person of color. I could call myself an ally and everything, but teaching the demographics that I have for all of these years and connecting with year after year of families and children of color, I keep looking at them going, things are just not right. And I can do my part to educate and to give opportunities and, make them realize the great stuff that they are. But I can't necessarily change the outer world and the outer culture, short of trying to build them up so that they go out and do great things and being a good representative for them on my end, on my sort of privileged background end. And when you asked me if you could sing it for your recital, I was like, oh, yes, of course. I want people to hear this. I want people to connect with it and spread it around. So yeah, anytime you want to sing it for whatever, go ahead, right? You want to make a full choir out of it, go right ahead, go do that.
I was gonna say I have some ideas. I'm telling you, I've been trying to make like connections in different ways to try and definitely do that. And the challenging but great part about music is that it always takes time. But when the time comes, it is like glorious and it's worth the wait. And that's something that I like learned. Oh my gosh, I'm like seriously like crying. I'm so sorry.
Don't be sorry.
um it takes for people to actually be a part of that vision to actually make it happen, and I think that's why music, it's just so different. There's much collaboration, but the right collaboration makes a difference.
It's so funny. I feel like this is another whole episode this conversation we're having. And I think I'm going to make like a part 1, part 2 kind of thing, because this conversation, it's always important to have, and I think it deserves its own focus, on the podcast. I'm going to create a part 1, part 2 situation for this, so that one part can really just highlight this experience, and then the other part will highlight the rest of the questions that we're about to go
I'm
through.
totally down.
Yeah, yeah. And now Nathalie Alcime sings Now.
Did you hear? Did you see? Did you listen? Why'd you sleep so long? Days and decades passed, centuries of generations affected as you dreamt sound asleep, as we screamed, tears on our pillows as blood was spilled. Did you see me? Did you hear me? Did you listen to me? Now, when the chaos got loud, you drowned out the noise with your pillow. When the flames got bright outside, you pulled your blinds. From the old slaves jumping ships, drowned in sorrows and anguish, to the new slaves being robbed blind of opportunity of a fair life. Did you see me hurting? Did you hear me calling out to you? Did you listen to me calling out, crying out, crying? Distractions. You're in a room full, you can drop them, but choose to keep them. Mumbled noise from the outside. Focus. Distractions. Noise from the outside. You choose to ignore. You saw me, heard me, tuned me out. Things have changed in the light of today. I appreciate everyone